Morning, everybody. It's Pastor John with another edition of Monday Morning Quarterback. So today we talked about that famous parable, that provocative parable of the rich man and Lazarus, where Lazarus is this poor man that lives outside the gate of the rich man, and he's a beggar and he has no food, and he dies and goes to be in heaven with Abraham. The Bible talks about his soul is in the bosom of Abraham. And the rich man in his lifetime basically ignored Lazarus and, enjoyed sumptuous feasts and the finest of everything. And he did not go to heaven. And so in that parable, is this conversation between the rich man and Abraham, who is in heaven. And the rich man's pleading with Abraham, hey, give me a little help here. Send Lazarus to help me out. And then he says, please send Lazarus to warn my brothers. So basically the rich man's saying, I was a selfish jerk my whole life and I'm paying for it. Can you send Lazarus to warn my brothers? Because they're also rich, selfish jerks. Can you warn them? And this is Abraham's response. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Now, I believe that when Jesus made that statement, he knew that he would, himself one day rise from the dead. And they may not even believe him. They might even find a way to dismiss that. But for we who claim to follow the risen Christ, these words are very important, because he's reminding us that we have all of the resources we need to know what God desires. And as I said in the sermon, God takes caring for the poor very seriously. In fact, more seriously than almost anything else in the Bible. And if you don't believe me, I invite you to go look through the Bible and peruse how many verses there are caring for the poor, the stranger, the outcast, versus any other topic in the Bible. And you'll see that that's something God takes very seriously. And Jesus, obviously, being God on earth, continued that. It reminds me of a Bible study that I led in the very first church that I served after I was ordained. I led this Thursday morning Bible study. It's still one of my favorite things I've done in my ministry. It was a group of elderly women. All but one of these women were widows, and they gathered every Thursday morning for what was a Bible study that was supposed to take, at least on the schedule, an hour and a half. We quite frequently took 2 hours or even more. But one time during this Bible study, we decided that we wanted to do a survey of the minor prophets, the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. Prophets like, Amos and Hezekiah and, Micah, all these prophets. And so we spent several months, going through chapter and verse of the minor prophets. And at the end of that study, as we were getting ready to say goodbye for our final, lesson of that series, a woman, put her Bible down and she goes, well, we've learned a lot in these last months. But the thing that I've learned most of all is that God really cares about the poor, the widow, and the orphan. And I said, yeah, he does. Because just a brief survey of the minor prophets, made it clear how important caring for the poor, the fatherless, the widow, that's central to the message of God. That's central to the message of Christ. But these are not just Christian values. These are, Judeo-Christian values for sure. These are God values. And so as we, kind of reflect on this parable, which is, like I said, it is challenging. Because, as I said in the sermon, we sympathize with Lazarus, the poor man, but we identify, socioeconomically at least, with the rich man. And so we want to be clear on how he got in his predicament. And we're right to want to be clear on how he got in his predicament. God takes caring for the poor seriously, more seriously, I think, than anything else in the Bible. I think it's one of God's primary values. And if it's one of God's primary values, then it behooves us in the church to make it one of our primary values too. Have a wonderful week, my friends. God bless.